Hello, I'm Tyler Hinrichs, and in this video we're going to be continuing Chapter 6 on testing. And this time we're going to be going into Android Studio and actually looking at how testing works, and we're going to be writing some tests ourselves. So first, over here on the left on the project window, we can see we have these three directories. This one is the main one which has all our code. We have the Android tests, which is for the instrumented tests, and the one we're going to be focusing on right now is this one, which is the test directory. And as before, I mentioned there was the example unit test. So I'm going to open that up right now. And as we can see, this is the same code from before. We have the class example unit test, and the function addition is correct right here, which once again modified with the @test modifier. And we have an assert equals, where we're basically checking to make sure 4 is equal to 2 plus 2. And we can see right now, this is actually a JUnit 4 test right now, but over here on the left, we see this button right here, which we can click to run the example unit test. This might take a second to load. And as we can see, we see test pass 1 of 1 test. So this, as I mentioned just a second ago, is using JUnit 4, which is what Android Studio has by default. So if we want to change this to JUnit 5, we will have to make a few changes to the Gradle. So we can open that here, build.gradle module app. That's the one you want to open. And we're going to be adding a few things in the dependencies. So I'm going to be copying and pasting a couple of things over just to speed up the video a little bit. I have these in a notepad right here, but I will explain what they're doing. So first, we have the test implementation and the test runtime only. Basically, this just says that the test implementation is for compiling and running tests, where test runtime only is simply for running tests, ones that don't need to be compiled. And as we can see here, we have JUnit 5, and this is also using Jupyter, which is associated with JUnit 5. So we're going to copy those over. We can paste them right here. And furthermore, there's going to be one more thing that we need to do. And that is this code right here. We have tasks with type test, and we're going to tell them to use the JUnit platform, which this is, although it doesn't explicitly say it, this basically means we're going to be using JUnit 5. It makes all tests, so all tasks with type test is all tests are going to use JUnit 5. This will cause our JUnit 4 tests to stop working, but there is an easy fix that we can add. So first, we will have to sync the Gradle just to make sure that those changes are updated. And that finished pretty quickly. So we can go back to the example unit test here. And I will run this again just to show that it's not going to work right now. Though it doesn't say it failed, it says test events were not received, which it says it right here. Basically, this just means it's not able to use the current platform that it's trying to test on. So the easy fix for this, we can just remove the imports right here and then re-import with using Alt-Enter. So previously, we had imported the test from JUnit 4, whereas we now want to do it from Jupyter, which is the JUnit 5. So we can click that right here. Once again, doing the same for this, using Jupyter. And this will just bring in the correct imports so that we can actually run these tests with JUnit 5 now. So as you can see, there's not a huge change for the example unit tests because there is a lot of overlapping functionality from JUnit 4 to JUnit 5. So we can basically go in here and we can run this again. And we will see test pass 1 of 1. So now we are using JUnit 5 in our project. So next, we're going to test the quiz view model. And this is a good one to test with unit tests because a view model isn't code that needs to be run on a device in order for us to test its functionality. So the easiest way we can make a test for that right now is to open up the actual file itself. And once we're in here, we can just simply click inside, anywhere inside the code, and do Control-Shift-T if you're on Windows, or Command-Shift-T if you're on Mac. So I'll do this, and we can create a new test automatically right here. We will see now we have JUnit 5 there. This is a warning that comes up sometimes, but what I found is we can basically just ignore it because we did just set that up in our project, and there won't be any issues once we eventually run the tests, create them and run the tests. So we can hit OK and OK again, and we will now see that we have a new file that has been created in the test directory here, right underneath example unit tests, where we've been given an internal class quiz view model test. This follows the naming conventions that I mentioned from before, and we can use curly braces to open this up. So the internal modifier here isn't necessarily necessary. As we can see, we have the example unit test has a class without it, but basically this just means we're going to scope it to the level of the module that we're at. So I'm going to go back to this test right here. We're going to start by making a test to check what the text is on the first question of the quiz view model when that is initialized. So once again, like I mentioned before, we need to make the @test modifier. As you'll see, we don't have this imported, but the Android autofill options allow us to, if we hit enter on this first option, it will import the Jupyter API, which is what we want. And then we're going to create this with a function now. So we're going to check provides correct question text. And essentially what this is going to do is just check to make sure that the first question of the quiz view model is correct. So to do that, we will have to initialize a quiz view model. And as we can see here, a quiz view model needs a saved state handle passed to it in its constructor when it's created. So we're going to first create a new saved state handle. So we go val save state handle, and this is going to be set equal to a saved state handle object, which this will show up as an error because we haven't imported it yet, but we can do Alt-Enter to import that right there. And then we don't need to pass anything into the save state handle because we're not really worried about basically forging any data prior to creating this, which we will see in the next test. We do want to add something to the save state handle to simulate a spot where we were as if we had gone through several questions already. So now we can make a quiz view model. We're going to set this up as val quiz view model equals, and we're going to set that equal to a quiz view model object like this, passing in the saved state handle. And now we're going to use our first assertion. We're going to use assert equals like I showed in the slides and in the example unit tests. We're going to go assert equals. And then as we can see from before, we can pull up the example unit test to see this in a more explicit way. But we have the expected goes first and the actual goes second, and we can add an optional message at the end, which I'll show how that works as well. So the expected here, we're going to be checking the first question of quiz view model, keep in mind. So we want to get r.string dot, and as you can see, this is question Australia. So that's what we expect it to be. And what we want to check is if the quiz view model's first question is that same thing. So we can go quiz view model dot current question answer, or current question text rather. And we can have a message for first question is incorrect. And this is basically the end of our first test. So what we can do right here is we can either run the individual test right here, or we can run the entire suite of test cases inside this class. I'll just run it from the outside right now, and we'll see what happens. This should be correct as we run it. So we'll run this right now. And we'll see test pass 1 of 1. However, if we want to see what happens when we get it wrong, we can change this up right here. So we can say just another random question. We can say r.string.question Asia. So we can go right here, type Asia. Now this will be wrong because our first question should be Australia. So we will see that the test will fail, and we'll see this message show up. So once again, we can run this right here. And we will now see test failed, 1 of 1 test. And if we scroll down a bit, we will see first question is incorrect, which is the exact message that I typed here. So basically, if you have a lot of tests all at once, having messages like that can just help your readability for seeing exactly what went wrong when you're testing. So now we're going to create one more test, and basically this test is going to check to see whether we correctly wrap around the question bank when clicking through the questions. So if you remember from GeoQuiz, what we did was you could click the next button and you could get all the way from 0 to 5, but once you got to 5, you could go back to 0 from the click of the next button. So we're going to be testing that functionality right now. So here we're going to go, once again, add the @test modifier, and we're going to do another functions. We're going to add fun, and then we're going to say wraps around question bank. And then in here, we're going to have to, once again, initialize a quiz view model. So we're going to do it in a similar way. We're going to go val saved state handle equals saved state handle. But now we're going to do something a little different than the last one. So in the previous one, we didn't add any data to the save state handle because we just wanted to start with a blank slate, start at question 0. But now we're going to do something a little differently because we want to start at question 5. So as we can see from quiz view model, we have the current index being saved in basically the dictionary that exists in the save state handle at current index key. So what we can do is pass a map or a dictionary and some other languages to the save state handle and set the current index to 5 so we can simulate the current question of the quiz view model being 5 when we start. So what we can do is map of, and here we will do current index key 2. We're going to use the word 2 as this sets that key equal to whatever we want to 5. And now we're going to once again set up a quiz view model. You can autofill this right here, and we're going to pass in the save state handle that we just made. Now we're going to do 2 assert statements. The first one is going to come before we hit the next button, or simulate hitting the next button at least. We're going to check to see and make sure that we're on the 5th question. Then we're going to use move to next, and then make sure that we are back at question 0. So we can go assert equals, and the 5th question here we can see is r.string.questionAsia. And next we're going to, this is what we expect it to be, but the actual is going to be quiz view model dot current question text. And we can add a message, so we can just say 5th question is correct, is incorrect, because this message will show up if we get it, the assertion fails. So then we're going to go quiz view model dot move to next, because this will basically increase the current index, which when we increase it, we want to go back to 0 instead of going from 5 to 6, because there is no 6th index in our question bank. So we can go, once again, we will check that. We can go assert equals r.string.questionAustralia, as this is the first question. And we want to check if that is quiz view model dot current question text. And then we can say doesn't wrap correctly, just in case that fails. So now what we can do is we can run this test individually. I'll show how that works, and then I'll show the entire thing. First, I'm just going to change this back just so we see that succeeding, because that's the actual test we want. So I'm going to run this test right here. And we'll see that test has passed. And now I can run the entire suite of test cases, which for us is just 2 right now, but they should both pass as I've changed that back to correct, and we can see that this one was just correct. So I'm going to run this entire class. And we will see test pass 2 of 2, no messages because those are correct. So basically, that's just a little introduction into testing, specifically unit testing from Chapter 6 in the textbook.